want to welcome you to today's Media Mentor session. I'm Dolly Wolf, founder of One Day Immersion in Media, Entertainment, and Technology. And again, just want to thank you so much for spending some of your Monday with us. Today's Media Mentor session features Christy Tanner, who's the Executive Vice President and General Manager of CBS Interactive, CBS News Digital. She oversees CBS News on all digital platforms, including CBSN, CBS News digital streaming news network featuring live anchored coverage across platforms, as well as CBS.com, mobile apps, and OTT apps. And that's over the top in case you don't know what that is. Under her leadership, she spearheaded the expansion of CBSN's original content slate. She joined CBS Interactive through the company's acquisition of TV Guide Digital, where as CEO, she transformed the business for an on-demand streaming audience. She holds a BA from Brown University and an MBA from Columbia Business School. And on behalf of the One Day Immersion team, we so appreciate Christy taking the time today because we understand, what her work schedule is like right now in this crazy nonstop news cycle. So we're always so very excited to recruit super women in media and showcase their hard work, their clear visions, and their leadership. So I'd love to welcome Christy Tanner.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I am fully remotely working in a cabin in Maine. And I've been overseeing CBS News Digital for 5 years now. CBS News Digital encompasses CBSNews.com, CBSN, our 24/7 streaming service, which is available on pretty much every device now, as well as our social editorial operation. I graduated from college in 1991. I went to work as a reporter and a journalist for 5 years. After that, the internet was really taking off in the mid 90s. And I went to go get an MBA because initially I thought it would make me a stronger journalist. I did realize that it was changing the media business. The internet was changing the media business. While I was at business school, really, was the first .com bubble. And it was booming so much that when I graduated, I no longer thought, well, I'll just go back and be a journalist. I decided to go to the business side of media. And so since 1999, for the past 20 plus years, I've been the digital person within legacy media companies, bringing about change in the media industry. So I've worked for a variety of almost every type of media company. I've worked for magazine companies. I've worked for newspaper companies. And now I work for a TV company, basically. So I've had every flavor of role. After business school, I really had to go back and learn every function on the business side. I've run business development, I've run sales, I've run marketing, I've overseen product development, and all of that came together 5 years ago when I was asked to oversee CBS News Digital and its new and developing streaming business. So my journalism background came together with all of my business experience to allow me to, take over a team that is really creating a product in a space where news hadn't been before. We'd had streaming, entertainment shows, scripted TV, but we really hadn't had streaming news. So that's what the last 5 years have been for me. Dolly, do you think I should try it?
Yeah, give it a try.
Yes, it's going to work. It's working. Okay. So what I would say is, you know, where we are now with CBS News Digital. I've been overseeing it for about 5 years, as I said. Service, diversity, inclusion, what you see reflects the audience that we're seeking. The service is more than 6 years old. We're on more than 20 devices, services, and platforms. The median and average age of our audience is 37. That's 20 to 30 years younger than cable and linear TV news audiences. And a key part of our news service is that we're nonpartisan. We're focused on facts and not opinion. All of the logos that you see on the bottom of this slide, those are all the places that we're distributed. So when I started 5 years ago, we were only on 5 of these logos, and now look where we are. The business has changed tremendously, and it's much more complex. Just to take a step back and think about this year, which has been so crazy on so many fronts. What I will say is it did start out more or less as we expected. We had, you know, State of the Union. We had a long-awaited impeachment proceeding in the Senate. But then we started the presidential campaign more or less as we thought, with the traditional events, caucus, an exclusive debate that we carried on CBS. CBSN live streamed that exclusive Democratic debate. It led to a record month. That day was our #1 day of all time. And then COVID shut down our office. And we did see it coming. I will say that. We had been covering it since it was growing, first in China and then in Italy and Europe in general. We have a global news service, so we cover global news daily. And so we had been planning, what if we have to shut down the office? What if we have to go remote? What will we do? When that day came, we were prepared. And so we were prepared to produce the stream remotely, to have everybody do it from their home. So what you're looking at here are all of our campaign reporters from their homes and our anchor doing an interview. Normally, they would have been doing this in the studio. Maybe some people, you know, coming in via satellite or remote, but generally speaking, they would have been in our office. In this case, every single aspect of this was done remotely. So people turn their parents' basements into bureaus, their living rooms. This is a control room view on someone's home television set. Things like Cuomo's daily press conference became must-see programming. We were soon live streaming, you know, hundreds of local and national press conferences with people trying to find out what is the latest news about COVID in my local area. Here you're looking at New York, Boston, LA. We have 10 local versions of CBSN, our streaming service. Obviously, people had to change their habits. They had to dress up their Zoom backgrounds so that the Twitter Zoom critique wouldn't slam them. People had to learn to work not only with their cats, but with their children on their laps. And I can tell you that, you know, I've done many Zoom meetings with my team where their children were crawling on their heads, in their laps, making guest appearances. But I have to say, we kind of have run a startup within a legacy media organization. People are very scrappy. They're very adaptable. And you can see here, you know, people that positive, you know, can do entrepreneurial spirit really came through in this situation of the COVID lockdown. So really what has allowed us to be successful through all this is that we had a team that functions as a team. So not just a team in name, but people with really strong and tight relationships who trusted each other. We couldn't have done it if we didn't already have a really solid team with no drama and no politics. We also had a plan. We did plan for what happens if COVID comes. Our first remote working plan kind of ran its course. Then we had a plan B that ran its course. Now we're into plan C. And it really has paid off in how the audience views us. People say what you do is more important now than ever before. You're my link to humanity. Thank you for your service. This is why people do it. This is why our team works, 18-hour days in COVID lockdown is that they do view this as a public service. It's also helped that Viacom CBS, our parent company, is a top 10 web property that has invested over a long period of time in this center of excellence, in digital being a center of excellence. And that has paid off for us in many ways. We have built SVOD, which is subscription on-demand service, and AVOD is advertising supported on-demand streaming service. That's the lingo that we use, but we have a subscription service, which is called CBS All Access. And we had an AVOD service, which is CBSN, which is what I run. They're all integrated and linked together. So CBSN is a part of All Access. Our sports, our local, our ET Live are a part of CBS News. As mentioned, we've launched 10 local streams, all of which are thriving and contributing to that overall powerful news service. And you can see here, these are all the cities, the top markets where we own TV stations, where we've started these local versions of the stream. Also, while in lockdown, we launched CBSN in 90 countries. So we're a global service as well. And we had 8 when COVID started. We now added 2. We added DFW and Chicago to our local network. And then, once as COVID was hitting, then we had, obviously nationwide Black Lives Matter protests. And just so happens that one of our owned and operated local streams is in Minneapolis. It's called CBSN Minnesota. So we were at ground zero of this story. We were able to provide round-the-clock coverage, not only in Minneapolis, but in other cities that were, experiencing protests. And, we gave the sort of in-depth coverage that CBS News and CBSN have become known for. Specials on racial justice, specials on how this will play into the election, live coverage of George Floyd's funeral. All of these things were services that we were able to provide to our audience because of the successful products that we have set up. At the same time, we're producing a ton of original content, an in-depth documentary series called CBSN Originals. We've now done more than 60 episodes of this. One of the most recent was that in the spring, we went to the Navajo Nation and reported on the impact of coronavirus in that community. We've been able to tap into our resources, our international bureaus, to produce 20 mini documentaries, which are social first, done in a social style, very, very fresh in terms of the way it's produced. And for that, we won a Webby Award. We also have a daily politics show called Red and Blue. This is a show that really takes the temperature day to day of the political landscape, not just on a national level, but also on a local level. We really dig into some of the really interesting local races and tap into local issues, not just elections, but issues that are bubbling up in local communities. And well, I updated this when there were 13 days. There are now 8 days until the election. And we'll be really, with live much of the time between now and then. And hopefully we're able to say who the president is a week from tomorrow, but we'll see. So in terms of what lies ahead for our business, diversity and inclusion remains super important to, not just us as an organization, but I think to what contributes to what's viewed as important news. And this is something that's been core to our group from the beginning, and something that, obviously we can always do better, and we are investing even more in now. Again, investing in reporting and technology, those two things go hand in hand for us. It's not just reporting and being able to do stories, but it's the technology to deliver those stories that is very important to the success overall of the business. We do expect ongoing political headwinds, and amid that, we will continue to be nonpartisan, and that's really core to the brand that we have. And then having a trusted brand in this era of where trust has really been let's say damaged to some extent. We know how valuable CBS News is as a brand, and we're building CBSN on top of that. So, we plan to continue to assert that. And I'll give a plug and a caveat here, which is that people saying, thank you, for your live coverage. I can watch it for free. That's really, part of the service here. And when I think about my phone and I think about the ability of, if there's a wildfire in my area, I'm able to watch live news and live coverage of that on my phone. That's really major part of the service that we're delivering here. And extreme weather, as climate change becomes ubiquitous, is something that we're going to continue to think about how we can provide the service as it begins to affect more people's lives. So with that, I can stop my screen share. If I can stop my screen share, yes, I stop my screen share. And happy to take questions, go more in depth.
I have a question. So first of all, thank you for being here. It's really helpful to see visually what you're doing and what your brand is doing. So during your this era of COVID, I know you mentioned that you all have been expanding to other countries because people are on digital all day. So how have you changed your strategy in terms of in addition to that, to make it more appealing for people to be on their phones or on their laptops, TVs to watch the news?
Yes. Well, first of all, we making the service work internationally is part of having the strong technology infrastructure that has existed. It's just so important that everything works. It's so important that when you're in another country, even if you have relatively low bandwidth, that the stream will work. And that's something that we've been investing in for a long time. In terms of the international audience, we realize that, the US is not the center of the universe. We also understand that people want to understand what's going on here because it does have such an impact on other countries. Making sense of what's happening right now is very important to people. But we tap into our global resources. We have bureaus around the world, in Asia, Europe, Africa, and South America. And so we regularly make good use of those correspondents. Sometimes there's not time for them on the linear half-hour evening news show when they have 22, 23 minutes to deliver everything. They're not going to get to every international story, but when we have 24 hours a day, we have a lot more time to get to those international stories.
Okay, thank you.
So, question from Arnold: how would global citizens relate to the CBS News infrastructure? I think that one of the things that's core to our service is that we have our team is diverse. So really of our anchors, let me think about this. We have 5 regular anchors, and 4 are women. One's Asian American, 2 are Black, 1 is Latina, and actually 2 Asian Americans. So again, not to define our team by race, but we don't have any.
How about ethnicity?
We don't have any white anchors. About ethnicity, well,
yeah, because people of color and those.
Yes, people who define themselves as Asian American, Latinx, and the Black community. So basically what I'm saying is, this is not a very articulate way for me to say this, but for global audience, almost everyone in our anchor team has relatives in other countries who are watching. And I think that changes one's perspective and how you relate to these international stories. That's one way to put it. It's, I don't know, maybe didn't explain that the best. Here's the next question. How many cameras or live stream are there? So we're, we have a pretty simple setup. We at times have people using their iPhones with a live view setup to stream from their homes. So we don't, in the past, you would have needed satellite trucks outside of everybody's homes in order to go remote, as we have, but that's not necessary anymore.
Christy, I have a question for you. Your career path has been mostly in the news space and journalism. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, especially with this 2020 has been mind-blowing to say the least. But I was wondering, what are the greatest rewards of your job and what you get to do every day?
Well, yeah, some of the news this year has just been so tough that it's hard almost to frame it as rewarding. I think one of the things that we're proud of is telling stories that aren't being told elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So we've been covering Black Lives Matter long before George Floyd became a story. Some of the terms and the discussion and the language around diversity and inclusion maybe was news to a mainstream audience. But for us and our audience, it isn't. Climate change is another really good example of that. Our audience knows what CO2 is. They are able to, we don't need to explain to them what carbon emissions are. They understand that there's a scientific link between extreme weather and climate change. And that's not something that we have to dumb down for them or explain. So I think that, we're really proud of the level that our coverage is at in terms of its giving our viewers the benefit of the doubt in terms of how intelligent we assume they are. We assume they're intelligent and dialed in, and that they want a deeper dive on topics, not just surface. Here's a question. How fast does the anchor speak in terms of tempo since it's read from the teleprompter? Yeah, I think I don't know that our tempo is any faster or slower than it would be on regular TV. I think the difference in skill set between our anchors and maybe traditional broadcast or cable TV is that they really have to think on the fly. They're very often covering live news as it's unfolding, and that's just a different skill set than anchoring a show that's totally scripted and planned out. What's the most surprising change you've seen in the news space over your career? Well, that's a good question. Well, my career started when I was a teenager. So the big change came in the 90s when everything went digital. When I first started editing, one of my first jobs was editing photos. We could only transmit 6 black and white photos per hour at the AP. So you really had to pick, if there was a big story and there were 10 really good images, you really had to pick the best image to send it out. Then everything went digital and you could send 100 images in a second. So you didn't have to pick anymore. Took away some of the thinking behind that particular job. I think the most surprising change is actually, and I think this is good, is how little has changed. The fundamentals of reporting are still really important and still really matter. I think there have been various times in the evolution of news where people thought, oh, citizen journalism is really going to take off. So just the average person with their iPhone will go to a political rally, and then that will become everybody's news. And I think that, those values of journalism and fairness and getting reporting right, an ability to tell a story and put it together in a way that everyone can understand it still remains a really important and valuable skill set. So not that I don't say that's surprising to me, but it's probably surprising to other people who thought, oh, the internet's means everyone's a reporter now. That has not come to pass.
So I was going to also mention that, a lot of the students and current graduates are looking for, some counseling around what's going on now as far as, careers. And a lot of them had internships or jobs that were rescinded, and trying to find ways of, staying connected and getting noticed and just an opportunity. Is there any insight or career advice that you could offer on how they stay connected and keep things moving forward?
Definitely. I always say it's a matter of odds. So, you have to have a lot of feelers out there in order to get back something successful. Staying in touch. There's a way to be persistent without being annoying, and lots of people do it. I have people who contact me once a quarter just to check in. Hi, how's it going? It's right place, right time, plus having the skill set. So you just never know on that day that you reach out to somebody if someone just quit that you can replace. So much of it is luck and being prepared. And I've so many times I've seen, people be persistent, be looking for something, and it just not be the right time. And then you happen to have time set up on a day that someone just left a position, or you just heard of an open position somewhere else and someone reached out to say, do you know anybody? So it's really hard, I think. And I've been there, having gone through the first .com bubble and the boom and the bust. You just kind of have to keep at it and try to keep your spirits up. And that can be hard.
I have a question related to that. So I'm really passionate about getting into the entertainment industry. I'm currently a junior in college, so I'm like in the midst of figuring out like what I'd want to do post grad. So I mean, this might be a broad question if I'm talking about like the entertainment industry as a whole and like the news industry, but are there any hard skills that you've found have been like really helpful when stepping into a new role, such as like whether it's like a creative hard skill that you've had or just any habits that you've done, like following the news and the industry?
Yeah. Well, one thing that in the entertainment industry, I think is being adaptable. I mean, it is that how things are done today is not how they're going to be done tomorrow. Being very can-do, willing to roll up your sleeves and literally do anything. And you know, when I graduated from business school, I thought, well, I'm a senior person. I've been in the working world for however many years. And I had to start over in some respects in my career to learn new skills. And I think really no job's too small. I mean, my first job was answering the phone, and I learned so much answering the phone. Nobody does that anymore, but I learned so much answering the phone in my first job in 1991 that, don't be afraid of those entry level positions, because those almost everybody who's successful now had some type of very, very grinding low level position. And people who start in the middle or closer to the top because they somehow luck into a big role, they tend not to do well over the long run. And it makes it really hard for them because they don't know the nitty gritty. I run a team right now of, editorial people, marketing, product. I've done every job. I've written stories, I've edited stories, I've made mistakes that had to be corrected. I've worked the overnight, so I can ask people to work the overnight because I've done it myself. All those things I think pay off in the end.
Yep, it's all about the grind.
Yep.
You've talked a lot about, or have offered up some career advice, but did you have mentors while you were, or at any time, whether in school or grad school, or even, early on in your career?
Yeah, I definitely did. I had people who looked out for me, took me under their wing, and I learned a lot from the people around me. Always. And I am still learning, not only from people who are more senior than me, but from people who are younger than me.
That is so key that you say that, because we do learn from each other, and it's been so obvious. And I think the fact that we do learn from each other, just because somebody is at a high level position and has a lot of responsibility doesn't mean that they continue to learn from somebody who maybe has some new eyeballs on something and new perspective. It's amazing how you kind of wake each other up. I've had that experience in my career for sure, where first I kind of pushed back because that's the stubbornness maybe in my generation. But it's so rewarding to speak to young people and get perspectives, because there is a lot to learn from both sides for sure. Well, I think at this point, if there are other questions, why don't you forward them to me, Dolly at One Day Immersion. I'd be happy to share them with Christy and see if we can get those answered. And but in the meantime, I just want to say, Christy, thank you so much for spending time with us today, for sharing your presentation and the background of what it is you do, offering your insight, and hopefully the students has some good tips to take away. But we really sincerely do appreciate the time that you offered us today.
Sure thing. Happy to do it. And good luck to you all.
Yes, and good luck, everybody. Let me know how I can help. Dolly at One Day Immersion. All right. Thanks and take care.